I sat on the edge of my bed, pretending to squint at the light. No one knew that my vision had returned 2 weeks ago. Not even my fiancé. But when I saw what he did that night, thinking I was still blind, I wished I had never regained my sight at all. Because some truths are better unseen. Kesa was only 23 when the accident happened. In one terrible moment, she lost both her mother and her sight. The world that used to be full of colors and faces turned into endless darkness. At first, she thought her life was over. She couldn't even walk to the door without help. But Pharaoh, her fiancé, held her hand and promised to stay. He told her that love didn't need eyes, only a heart. His words became her comfort, his voice her guide. Everyone said Kesa was lucky to have a man like him. Someone who didn't leave when things got hard. For 5 long years, she learned to live in that darkness. She memorized the shape of her home through touch. The corner of the couch, the edge of the table, the warmth of Pharaoh's hand whenever he helped her sit or eat. Every morning, she would smile when she heard his footsteps coming into the room. He would kiss her forehead and tell her how beautiful she looked, even though she could never see his face again. But as time passed, something inside her began to notice small changes. Pharaoh's voice didn't sound the same anymore. Sometimes it was softer, almost distant, like he was pretending to care. His laughter came less often, and when he thought she couldn't hear, she could sense his silence, cold and heavy. There were moments when he walked past her without saying a word, and she could feel the air shift, like something dark was hiding just out of reach. She tried to ignore it. She told herself maybe it was her imagination. Maybe pain was making her see shadows that weren't there. But her heart didn't agree. Every time he touched her hand, she felt no warmth. Every time he said, "I love you," it sounded more like an obligation than truth. Still she smiled, grateful for the care he gave. He helped her dress, made her tea, and read her books at night. To everyone else, he was a saint, the loyal man who stayed beside a blind woman when most would have left. But inside, Kesa felt a quiet ache she couldn't explain. There was something about his silence, about the way he watched her even when she couldn't see, that made her uneasy. She didn't know what it was yet, but deep down she felt it, that the darkness she lived in was safer than whatever truth waited on the other side of sight. One cold, rainy morning, Kesa opened her eyes and felt something strange. For the first time in 5 years, she saw a faint light sneaking through the curtains. It was weak, blurry, but real. She sat up quickly, her heart beating fast. Was she dreaming? She blinked again, her fingers shaking as she waved them in front of her face. She could see the outline of her hand, a sight she thought she would never have again. Tears filled her eyes, and she covered her mouth to stop the sound that almost escaped. All morning she sat there, afraid to move, afraid it would disappear if she spoke. When Pharaoh came in to check on her, she turned her face away, pretending she couldn't see him. She smiled gently, acting as if everything was normal. Inside, her heart was racing. She wanted to scream with joy, to run outside and thank the heavens. But something inside her whispered to wait, to stay quiet. She wasn't sure why, but her soul told her not to tell anyone yet. Over the next few days, her sight became clearer. Colors began to return, faint at first, then brighter. She watched the sunrise from her bed, the sky painted in orange and pink, a beauty she had forgotten. She looked around her room, touching things she hadn't seen in years. But what shocked her most was how much had changed. Her once bright room looked dull and dusty. The flowers Pharaoh promised to replace weekly were dead. Her favorite picture frame was gone. The house didn't look cared for, not the way he had always described it. When Pharaoh came home that evening, she pretended to bump into the table as he walked in. He laughed softly and said, "Careful, my love," helping her sit down. His smile looked kind, but when she saw his eyes, they didn't match his words. There was no love there, only something cold, distant. For the first time, she could see his expression when he thought she couldn't. Kesa stayed silent, pretending to remain blind. She wanted to see the world as it truly was, the one she had been kept from for so long. She wanted to know if Pharaoh was the man he appeared to be when she couldn't see, or if he had been hiding something behind that gentle voice. Each day, she watched quietly, noticing things she never could before. The way he avoided her gaze, the secret phone calls, the late-night whispers. And even though she had regained the gift of sight, she didn't feel the joy she expected. Instead, a heavy fear settled in her heart. Maybe the real miracle wasn't that she could see again, but that she could finally see the truth that it began with small things, things that most people wouldn't notice. Kesa had started watching Pharaoh carefully ever since her sight returned. One morning, she woke up early and heard him getting ready. He told her he had an early meeting at work, kissed her on the cheek, and left. Out of curiosity, she slowly got up and moved to the window. For the first time in years, she could see him clearly, the man she thought she knew so well. He didn't go toward his office. Instead, he walked down the street, smiling as he checked his reflection in a car window. Her heart pounded, but she told herself not to jump to conclusions. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe he really was meeting a client. But something inside her wanted to know the truth. The next morning, she waited again. This time, she followed him quietly, careful not to be seen. When she reached a small cafe near the main road, she froze. Pharaoh was sitting across from a young woman, laughing in a way Kesa hadn't seen in years. His eyes sparkled. His hands rested gently over the woman's fingers, the same way he used to hold hers. Kesa's vision blurred with tears. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. For years, this man had been her world, her only light in the dark. He had fed her, cared for her, told her she was his everything. But now she saw the truth, that while she lived in darkness, he was living a double life. The woman smiled at him with trust, the same kind Kesa had once given. Watching them together, she realized how easily he lied. She walked back home before he noticed her. Every step felt heavy, like she was walking through water. When Pharaoh returned later that night, he came in humming softly, pretending to be tired. He hugged her from behind and said, "You're my whole world, Kesa. I don't know what I'd do without you." His voice was gentle, practiced, almost perfect. Kesa forced a smile, trying not to let the tears escape. "I know," she whispered, her voice barely steady. He kissed her forehead and went to shower, humming again, as if nothing had happened. She sat still, her hands gripping her knees. The silence in the room grew deeper. Something inside her broke that night. Not her heart. She had loved too purely for that. What shattered was her trust, the faith she had built around him for 5 long years. She realized that blindness had protected her from this pain. And now that she could see, she wished she hadn't. Because sometimes, the most painful sight is finally seeing who someone truly is. Kesa had learned to stay quiet, to watch and listen without letting anything show. But every night, when Pharaoh thought she was asleep, he would sit in the living room and talk on the phone. His voice was low, but she could still hear bits of his laughter and careless words. One night, when curiosity and pain became too heavy, she hid a small recorder under the couch. She wanted to know what he said when he believed she couldn't hear, when he thought she was still blind and helpless. The next morning, after Pharaoh left for work, she played the recording. At first, she heard his usual calm tone. But then his laughter filled the room, sharp and cruel. He was talking to someone named Zuri, the same woman from the cafe. Kesa's hands trembled as she listened. "She still thinks I'm faithful," Pharaoh said, laughing. "You should see her. She believes every word I say. Being with a blind woman makes life so easy. No questions, no proof, nothing to hide. Her disability fund covers the bills, and everyone praises me for being the perfect man." Kesa froze, her whole body stiff. The man who once promised her love, who once wiped her tears, was using her as a tool, a story to make himself look good, and a source of money to fund his lies. Her chest felt tight, her heart like it was cracking open. She had believed his kindness, trusted his care. And now she realized that every gentle touch had been covered in deceit. She played the recording again, hoping she had heard it wrong. But each word cut deeper. Pharaoh and Zuri joked about her blindness, about how easily she believed him, how she would never find out. He called her sweet but simple. They laughed about the life they were living behind her back. Kesa couldn't cry. The tears wouldn't come. She just sat there in silence, the room spinning around her. For 5 years, she had trusted him completely, letting him guide her, protect her, and love her. Now she saw that he wasn't protecting her. He was protecting his secret. That night, when Pharaoh returned home and greeted her with a kiss, she stayed still. She smiled the same way she always did, pretending she was still the blind woman who needed him. But inside, everything had changed. She no longer saw him as her savior. She saw him as a stranger who had built his comfort on her pain. And as he sat beside her, talking about how lucky they were to have each other, she quietly decided, this time he would be the one who didn't see what was coming. Kesa had become quiet, almost invisible in her own house. She no longer asked questions, no longer complained. But behind her calm face, her eyes were open and watching everything. Every small detail that once went unnoticed now told her a story. Pharaoh thought she was still blind, still the woman who needed his help to move from one room to another. But Kesa was different now. She had learned the power of silence. Zuri started visiting the house more often. Pharaoh told Kesa that Zuri was just a family friend who came to help him manage a few things. Kesa smiled politely and nodded, pretending to believe every word. But she watched closely. Zuri would enter her room when she thought Kesa was resting. One afternoon, Kesa saw her wearing Kesa's favorite silk scarf, the one Pharaoh had given her years ago on her birthday. Zuri even sprayed the same perfume Kesa used to love. The bottle was gone from her dressing table the next day. Kesa's heart hurt, but she stayed calm. She moved slowly, pretending to grope for furniture as usual. When Zuri passed by, Kesa would smile softly and say, "Thank you for visiting," as if nothing was wrong. Inside, though, she was memorizing every movement, every glance, every careless laugh they shared. Then came the day she checked her bank account. Pharaoh had always handled her finances since she lost her sight, telling her not to worry about money. But now that she could see, she started checking the statements secretly through her phone. What she found made her hands go cold. Large withdrawals had been made, money she never approved. Signatures that looked almost like hers appeared on the documents. Pharaoh had been taking her money little by little, hiding it behind sweet words and gentle smiles. That evening, when he came home with Zuri, Kesa sat quietly on the couch. She greeted them with her usual soft voice and let him guide her. Across the room, she pretended to stumble slightly, letting him hold her arm as if she couldn't see the rug in front of her. He smiled, thinking she still needed him, and she smiled back, hiding the storm inside her. Every night, after he went to sleep, she sat awake, planning her next move. She didn't want to scream or fight. That would give him power. No, she wanted him to destroy himself, piece by piece, through his own lies. By day, she was still the blind woman he thought he controlled. But in truth, she could see everything: the stolen perfume, the missing clothes, the forged documents, the fake affection. Kesa had become the quiet watcher, the woman who knew the truth but waited for the perfect moment to reveal it. She was no longer blind. She was awake, alert, and ready. One afternoon, while Kesa was sitting in the garden pretending to enjoy the sun, she heard a familiar voice call her name. It was soft, warm, and filled with memories. When she turned, she saw Simi, her childhood friend, the one who had stood by her before the accident, but had moved away afterward. Kesa's eyes filled with emotion. She hadn't seen her in years, and now, finally, she could truly see her again. Simi ran to her, hugging her tightly. "Kesa, I've missed you so much," she said, her eyes teary. Kesa smiled gently and replied, "I've missed you too." They sat down together, talking about old times, laughing at childhood stories. And for the first time in a long while, Kesa felt a bit of peace. But deep inside, she wanted to share her secret, the secret that her sight had returned. Carefully, she hinted at it. She told Simi how, some mornings, she thought she could see shadows and light again. Simi stopped talking and stared at her, surprised. "Wait, you mean your sight might be coming back?" she asked quietly. Kesa nodded slightly, her fingers playing with the edge of her dress. "Then why haven't you told Pharaoh?" Simi asked, confused. "Shouldn't he be the first to know?" Kesa looked down, her voice soft. "Because I need to know who he really is before he knows I can see. The truth will mean nothing unless it's seen." Simi watched her, realizing there was more pain behind those words than Kesa was showing. Slowly, Kesa told her everything. About Pharaoh's other woman, the fake sweetness, the stolen money, and the cruel phone calls. Simi listened silently, her eyes wide with disbelief. When Kesa finished, Simi took her hand. "You don't deserve this," she whispered. Kesa smiled sadly. "I know. But I don't want revenge. I just want him to expose himself. I want him to fall into the trap he created with his own lies." From that day on, Simi became her silent partner. She helped Kesa gather small bits of proof, copies of documents, recordings, and photos. They planned everything carefully, making sure Pharaoh wouldn't suspect anything. Simi admired Kase's strength, how she stayed calm despite everything she had discovered. Every time Pharaoh visited with Zuri, Simi would watch from a distance, helping Kesa confirm what she already knew. Kesa didn't raise her voice or act differently. She played her role perfectly, the blind woman who couldn't see. But now she wasn't alone anymore. She had someone who truly knew her pain and understood her plan. Together, they waited patiently, knowing that the day would come when Pharaoh's lies would crash around him. And when that moment arrived, it wouldn't be out of anger. It would be justice, quiet and undeniable. Pharaoh came home one evening, pretending to be full of excitement. He told Kesa he wanted to organize a special dinner in her honor, a Thanksgiving celebration to appreciate her courage and strength over the years. He said it would be small and peaceful, just close friends and neighbors who had supported them. Kesa nodded with a soft smile, pretending to be touched by his kindness. In truth, her heart was quiet but alert. She knew Pharaoh too well now. Every kind gesture hid a reason. Over the next few days, she listened as he made calls and sent out invitations. He told everyone that his poor blind fiancé had inspired him more than anyone else, and that he wanted to show his love publicly. People praised him for being such a loyal man, and Kesa smiled each time she overheard it. No one knew the truth. Not yet. One night, as Pharaoh spoke on the phone in the living room, Kesa slowly walked closer, staying in the shadows. His tone changed completely. The soft, caring voice he used around her disappeared. He was laughing, speaking to someone she instantly recognized, Zuri. After the dinner, he said proudly, everyone will think I'm a hero. They'll believe I've given my life to care for a blind woman. But when the guests leave, you'll be the one I'm with. I'll propose to you right there, under her roof. She'll never even know. Kesa froze. His words pierced her like a knife. He wasn't just unfaithful. He was shameless. The dinner wasn't to honor her. It was to strengthen his image and celebrate his lies. He wanted to humiliate her without her even realizing it. For a moment, she closed her eyes, holding back the tears that burned her throat. But then something changed. A strange calm filled her heart. She didn't feel broken anymore. She felt ready. She returned quietly to her room, her mind already working. That night, she sat by the mirror and looked at her reflection. The woman who had once believed love was blind, now staring back with steady, knowing eyes. So this is who you really are, Pharaoh, she whispered softly. You think I can't see, but tomorrow the whole world will. When Simi visited the next morning to help with preparations, Kesa told her everything she had overheard. Simi squeezed her hand and nodded. Then it's time, she said. By evening, the house was decorated, candles glowing warmly, guests laughing, everyone praising Pharaoh for his devotion. He played the perfect host, smiling sweetly at Kesa as if he truly loved her. But Kesa sat there quietly, her heart steady, her mind sharp. She knew what she had to do. That night would no longer be Pharaoh's celebration. It would be his revelation. It would be the moment Kesa finally opened her eyes, not just for herself, but for everyone to see the truth he had tried so hard to hide. The house was glowing with lights that evening, filled with laughter, perfume, and chatter. Pharaoh had spared no expense. There were flowers on every table, expensive wine, and guests dressed like royalty. He called it a Thanksgiving dinner for his brave wife, Kesa, the woman who had lost her sight but never her heart. Everyone admired him, calling him a caring husband. Kesa sat quietly at the end of the table, wearing a soft smile, her hands folded neatly. No one knew her heart was racing, not from nerves, but from the truth she was about to reveal. Pharaoh moved through the room like a proud king, shaking hands, taking credit for being such a devoted man. Beside him, Zuri glowed in a red dress, pretending to be just a family friend. The two exchanged secret smiles, thinking Kesa couldn't see. But she saw everything. The way Zuri's hand brushed his, the way he whispered something that made her blush. When dinner began, Pharaoh stood up with a wine glass and raised his voice for everyone to hear. Tonight, he said with a charming smile, we celebrate my dear wife Kesa. She has suffered, yet she smiles. She cannot see us, but her heart sees love. The guests clapped. Cameras flashed. Everyone looked touched. Everyone except Kesa. As he continued talking about loyalty and love, Kesa's friend Simi, sitting near the back, watched quietly. She knew what was coming. Pharaoh leaned close to Case's ear, his voice low enough for only her to hear. "You'll always be in the dark, love," he whispered with a smirk, confident that she would stay silent as always. But this time she didn't. As he reached to pour her wine, Case suddenly reached out and caught the glass. Perfectly. Without hesitation, before a single drop could spill. The sound of gasps filled the room like thunder. Forks froze midair. Faces turned pale. Pharaoh stepped back, confused, his eyes wide. "You're seeing," he stuttered, his voice trembling for the first time. Case stood slowly, her chair scraping the floor. She looked straight at him, her gaze cold and calm. "I've been seeing for weeks, Pharaoh," she said softly, but every word hit like a storm. "And now everyone else will see who you truly are." The room went silent. Zuri's hand dropped from the table. The guests looked at each other in shock, realizing the perfect husband they admired was nothing but a liar. Pharaoh's confident smile disappeared, replaced with fear. Case stood tall, not as the blind, helpless woman they thought she was, but as a woman who had seen through everything. And that night, under the same roof where he once mocked her pain, Pharaoh's world finally began to crumble. Everyone in the room froze as Case reached into her purse and quietly placed her phone on the table. Pharaoh looked confused, trying to keep his fake smile in place. But when she pressed play, his entire world began to crumble. His own voice filled the room, laughing with Zuri, mocking Case, talking about how she would never see again, how easy it was to take her money, how he forged her signature without her knowing. The guests stared in shock. The same man who had just called himself a loving husband was now exposed as a liar and a thief. The audio kept playing, every cruel word, every sneaky plan, every laugh shared with Zuri at Case's expense. Pharaoh's face turned pale, his hands trembling as whispers spread across the room. Some guests covered their mouths. Others shook their heads in disgust. Case didn't shout. She didn't cry. She just stood there, strong and steady, her eyes fixed on him. "You wanted me blind," she said softly. "But you forgot. People don't stay blind forever." Pharaoh tried to grab her hand, his voice breaking. "Case, please. I can explain." But she pulled her hand away. "Explain to them," she said, nodding toward the guests. "Explain why you stole from me. Explain why you brought another woman into my home." His mouth opened, but no words came out. The truth was already louder than his lies. Zuri, too humiliated to stay, slipped quietly toward the door, covering her face as she rushed out. The cameras that once took happy pictures were now recording Pharaoh's downfall. Guests began to murmur, some standing, some glaring at him. The perfect image of the loving husband shattered right before everyone's eyes. Pharaoh fell to his knees, his voice shaking. "Case, please forgive me," he whispered. But she only looked at him with calm eyes. "Forgiveness is not something you demand," she said softly. "It's something you earn, and you've earned nothing but pity." Then, turning to the guests, she took a deep breath and said, "Blindness didn't make me weak. Trust did." Her words hung heavy in the air, echoing deeper than any sound before. For a long moment, there was silence. Then slowly, people began to clap. Not loudly, not cheerfully, but with quiet respect. It was the kind of applause that came from the heart, from people who had just witnessed real courage. Case didn't stay for long after that. She walked out of the room gracefully, her head held high, leaving behind a man who once thought she'd never see again, but now saw everything more clearly than ever. That night, the world saw not a blind woman, but a brave one who had unmasked deceit with nothing but truth and calm strength. Months passed, and the noise of that shocking night faded into distant memory. Case quietly packed her things and left the city without saying goodbye. She didn't want to stay in a place that had once blinded her heart more than her eyes. She moved to a smaller town, calm, green, and peaceful, where no one knew her story. There, she started something new. A small rehabilitation center for women who had lost their sight. Every morning, the center was filled with laughter and soft music. Case taught them simple skills: how to walk confidently, how to cook safely, how to use their hands and hearts to navigate a world that often misunderstood them. But more than that, she taught them strength. She told them that being blind didn't mean being broken, and that trusting the wrong person could be far more dangerous than darkness itself. Many of the women looked up to her. They called her Mama Case, not because of her age, but because of her warmth. She shared her story in small pieces, never naming names, never showing bitterness. The world will sometimes pity you, she would say, but don't let pity become your prison. You are not helpless. You are powerful. Simi often visited her, bringing small gifts from the city and updates about people who once pretended to care. One afternoon, as they sat under a large mango tree watching the sunset, Simi asked softly, "Do you ever wish you never got your sight back?" Kesa smiled, her eyes reflecting the golden light of the setting sun. "Sometimes," she admitted, "life was quieter in the dark. I couldn't see lies, only words. But then I remember, seeing the truth set me free." Simi reached out and held her hand. For a moment, they sat in silence, feeling the cool evening breeze brush their faces. Kesa watched as the last rays of sunlight painted the sky orange and pink. It was a sight she once thought she would never witness again. Yet now, it wasn't the colors that moved her. It was the peace inside her heart. She had lost her trust, her marriage, her home. But she had gained herself. And that, she realized, was the greatest vision of all. As the first stars appeared in the sky, Kesa smiled to herself. She no longer needed to prove anything. She was no longer a victim or a woman defined by pain. She was simply Kesa, strong, calm, and free. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid of